The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson. As you can see, Shannon is not here today. She's feeling a little under the weather, so I'm filling in for her, and we hope she is back tomorrow. We've got a very exciting show for you this morning. In just a moment, we'll be joined by Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh for Ask Dr. Doreen. As you know, this is an interactive show where Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, world-renowned expert on autism behavior, is here to answer your questions about your child. So this is an amazing opportunity. And in our second hour, I will be solo hosting Let's Talk Autism. We have a great guest, his name is not Dr. Jack Creamer, he's producer Jack Creamer, and he's talking about his new documentary, Programming Hope, very interesting film about adults with autism. And Ask Dr. Doreen, as I said, is meant to be interactive. Kelby, our director, is going to show you some of the different ways in which you can interact with us. They are up on the screen now. I want to remind you that Autism Live's homepage is autism-live.com. You can watch the live show, you can ask questions, and you can even check out our 100 most recent episodes. I'm very excited to be talking with Dr. Doreen. She will be joining us in just a second.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
And we are here with Ask Dr. Doreen. Hi, Doreen.
Good morning.
I'm
How
so
are
happy
you?
to be with you today.
I know, it was such a nice surprise that you're here.
I'm sorry
Of
that
course,
Shannon's under the weather,
Me
but
too.
want
Me
her to
too.
get well, and I'm
Yes.
glad she stayed home to get some rest.
And if she's watching, we miss
Mwah.
you.
We miss you, Shannon.
Shannon, and love
Yes,
you and
I
feel
think
better.
I think Jem has been bringing home some, things from school, colds and stomach flus and various things. So, I do want to give the disclaimer that we want to remind you that no expert can give individual specific advice in this format, but Dr. Granpeesheh can give us some important insights that can help us to have a greater understanding of what step may be beneficial to get the progress you're seeking with your child. So, Doreen, let's start with...
Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
We
today,
do.
my
We have a
gosh.
lot that have come in. The first one we want to start with is
Sure.
my 2-year-old is being evaluated for Asperger's, and I want to kind of get into that. He only says 10 words, no sentences, is fixated on the way his toys are arranged, otherwise throws the toys in a fit, and socially he doesn't know how to be gentle. From what I can tell, he will join in with other kids, but more as an observer than a participant. How do I help him in these areas at home and at daycare? How can I help him at home with his language skills? He gets very frustrated when he can't verbalize what he wants, needs. He understands what myself and his dad ask him and responds via action. Something red flags here for me, and that is my 2-year-old is being evaluated for Asperger's.
Yeah. So, and further reading, very good catch, first of all, but also kind of reading the symptoms and signs. I think in general, your 2-year-old should be evaluated for ASD, autism spectrum disorders. Asperger's used to be its own classification. It actually doesn't exist anymore, and it is now a type of ASD. So you could receive a diagnosis of ASD, Asperger's type. But having said that, at the age of 2, it's very unlikely that someone will receive a diagnosis of Asperger's unless it's extremely mild. Language deficits will not allow a diagnosis of Asperger's. So if just reading these symptoms, to me, if your child only says 10 words and he's beginning to develop some sort of aggressive behaviors out of frustration, it's more likely that he will receive a diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder. Now, the severity of that might be very light. It might be level 1 severity on both the social and repetitive behaviors, or it might be 2 or 3. It doesn't really matter because he's 2.
Right.
You know, at the age of 2, there's so much promise and there's so much time to change things that we just kind of, it's not something for you to be worried about. And I say that because sometimes when we're at the beginning, as you know this, Nancy, when you're at the very beginning, you hope that it isn't ASD.
Right.
And then just, you know, if the child does have a need to be diagnosed, it's only because once you're diagnosed, you receive treatment. And we don't want to delay that. We don't want to, let's say, avoid that or think it's not true, because the sooner we get over our own fears, the sooner our children will receive the interventions they need. So
right. Denial does not serve a parent well.
Thank you. That's the word. Yeah, exactly. And from my perspective, don't worry. Go and get the evaluation for ASD. Figure out.
It sounds like they're already set up with
someone to be
diagnosed.
Yes.
But I'm just curious why just the Asperger's was
right. Yeah, and I have to say that. So now you're asking about how do I help him because he gets very frustrated, and you figured out a very key aspect of what all of our kids have to deal with is that they can't communicate their needs and they get frustrated and then they aggress. So a lot of the challenging behaviors, and I often say this, have just to do with an inability to be able to communicate and the frustration that results from that. So I can't get my needs met. I'm going to hit because then I know you'll pay attention to me. I'm going to pinch you because I know you'll give up that object I want. So all of aggression which this child is developing or frustration is really lack of communication. Now, it's not like, how do I help him? You do an ABA program. It's not something you do on the side. You basically engulf his whole life into an ABA program right now at the age of 2. This is where you have the highest hope for success. And you do a massive amount of ABA. You get him into a program right away where you do EIBI, which is early intensive behavioral intervention.
Which is considered how many hours a week, Doreen?
40 hours a week of ABA. So that means, to be honest, this came from the concept when we first talked about this back in the 80s, 70s, 80s with Lovos. The idea was that it would be all of the child's waking hours. And so that's way more than 40 hours. But the concept was that a therapist would work 40 hours and then the parent would supplement it when they were home. Exactly. So it's really all of the child's waking hours as much as you can. And the concept is you teach the child all these skills like communication of basic needs, or at 2 he should be tacting, which has to do with pointing out things in the environment and labeling them and saying, look at the red truck, or whatever, and describing things, and all of that should be happening at 2. 10 words is a 1-year skill, or even below 1. It's like 9 months to 12 months. So he is already 1 year delayed. You need to get him into an ABA program which will deal with his speech as well, and will get things going pretty fast. It's just important for you to focus right now, get the diagnosis, get him into a comprehensive ABA program, and hopefully you are in a state that's covered and you have insurance and you'll have funding for that.
And if she's not in a state where she can access it, there is skills, correct?
There's absolutely skills. So if you are in a location where you don't have insurance funding, you should go online. Skills is, there's a little thing that Shannon uses right here.
Oh, yes,
This
skills.
is the, it's skillsforautism.com, and you guys can always access that, and it will, it's a program that helps you know what the next steps are. It'll teach you how to teach everything, including if you just want to look at like how do I teach him language. There's a whole language domain. It's a massive number of lessons to teach just in the language area. And it does go by age, so you will answer a bunch of questions, and it'll only offer you lessons that are appropriate for a 2-year-old. You'll also want to learn techniques. You'll want to learn how to do ABA, and for that you go to Institute for Behavioral Training. That's ibehavioraltraining.org.com, ibehavioraltraining.com, and there you'll learn how to manage the challenging behaviors, how to handle it when he gets frustrated, all those types of things. In an ABA program, you need to know the techniques and you need to know the content. Skills brings you the content, IBT brings you the techniques, and you could do it yourself with a lot of help from other people, because you really have to do many hours. You know, with our kids, it really does take a village. It takes more like a country.
Yes, exactly.
But please let us know if you write in again if you would like us to give you more information, or if you are in a state and you don't know if there's coverage. Most of our states are covered now.
Yeah.
And most insurance, and of course Obamacare, you can get coverage through Medicaid now. So.
Right. Now she mentions he's in daycare. You would advise having an aide, one-on-one, correct?
You know, he's 2, and I don't know. I would have to see his functioning level. I would either have an aide with him, or I'd pull him out of daycare and do intensive therapy, because he's only 2.
It might not be possible. This mom might work full-time.
Yes. Well, I mean, now we have center-based at all the card sites, right? So if you go with card, we would probably have you drop him off at our site where he would get therapy all day long.
Right.
And that is what he needs. He needs a lot of intensive therapy right now. It would teach him way more than just language. You know, in the beginning, I think, Nancy, and you might comment on this, I think parents think it's overkill, like 40 hours. My God, what are they going to do with 40 hours, you know?
Right.
And you look at it and you think like, okay, that's too much. But then if you look at skills, you'll see the number of things you actually have to work on. And honestly, before you know it, the child is 4 and we're out of time, because now we have academics has to join in as well.
Right.
And then we're like, oh my gosh, we have to do all this academic stuff, and we don't have enough time to focus on the things that are important to his daily living.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to respond to this mom, I would just say it may seem overwhelming right now, what Dr. Grandpichet just said, but he's 2. And, you know, my son Wyatt was diagnosed late. He did not really get treatment till 4 3/4, and we did do the intensive 40 hours a week at that point. I would give anything to be able to go back and have those 2 more years where we know the neuroplasticity of the brain is more malleable. So the good news is time is on your side. Go after this. Don't be intimidated, and just don't give up. Get your child into an intensive ABA program now.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's move on. This one is a good one because I'd like to know the answer to this too. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Grandpichet. How do we teach so our teen will listen? 14-year-old, which Wyatt is as well, tells me, don't worry about it. I'm being put on extinction. The parent is being put on extinction. If it's urgent, I hold his phone hostage and get immediate compliance. But I want to respect his independence and be able to teach or coach without nagging. He is an awesome kid. Our main challenge is finding a healthy alternative to his favorite sweet drink.
So that's kind of lovely, actually, because it's a very high level issue to have.
Right.
You know, I think this is typical of all of our teens. 14 is a tough age. My
tell
God.
me about it.
Yeah, and they just they believe they know everything, and they believe they know more than we do, actually.
And aren't they starting to really assert their independence?
Very much so.
And it's tough with a child on the spectrum because we do have, we are working with them to get compliance and various things. And they're seeing their friends, their typical friends, being very independent, and they want that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even for typically developing kids, they want more independence than is appropriate.
Right.
They really think they could move to another city. I mean, I look at my daughter.
You know that.
Yeah, I look at my daughter, and she's 14, and she probably could function on her own, quite honestly, because she's so capable.
Knowing Charlie, I'm sure she could.
Yeah, she could, And but the thing is, because of that, because they become more capable as they age, they start to really believe that they can they're right about everything, and they become a little bit fearless.
Right.
And that's what's dangerous, is because there's so much we learn from being hurt, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I think part of this to me is, to some extent, you have to let them experience their own punishments, their own natural environmental punishers, which we as parents always resist, because maybe we've gone through experiences in life which have taught us, never do this.
Right.
But we can't necessarily have our kids live that through us because they haven't experienced it themselves. So to some extent, we just need to not nag. We need to let them do their own thing and make their own mistakes. That is important, because then they'll really learn it forever.
Right.
And then to some extent, as Nancy said, of course, our kids on the spectrum, we're even more concerned because they might not be aware of certain things that are going on around them. So it's very hard for me to answer this because I don't know the functioning level of your 14-year-old.
He sounds quite high functioning.
It does,
If he's saying,
he does.
Don't worry about it, things like that.
Absolutely. And, so you have to ask yourself if he really, do you need to worry about it? Is he able to?
I mean, isn't some of this possibly typical behavior?
Exactly.
Because 14-year-olds rebel, right?
Absolutely. And like you said, as a parent of a child with a disability, we're a little bit more protective even.
Right.
So it could be that in this case, you need to step back and let him do his thing. And sometimes you should ask yourself, like, for example,
Let's talk about that sweet
drink. Exactly.
Let's cover that specifically, because I think she really wants help there.
Perfect. So we'll talk about the sweet drink. So why would we want to change this? Let's ask ourselves.
Help.
Is it just, well, that's the thing. Is it just because we think anything with sugar is going to necessarily be bad for him? Okay, well, that's not necessarily true, unless, is he overweight? I have to ask that. If he's overweight, then this becomes an issue.
Right.
Does he
What
have
about
bad
jacking
teeth?
him up? What about jacking him up?
Exactly. Does he have bad teeth? That's another one.
Wyatt has never had a cavity because he's never had juice and sugar.
Okay. And the third one is, does he get hyper? So are those the three issues? Do those issues exist? Or is it just because you feel like, oh, sweet drinks are no good?
Right.
And so, if one of those issues actually does exist, then you have, what I'm trying to say is, first of all, if you don't have one of those issues, then leave it alone. If you do, choose your battles. If you do have one of those issues and it is one of the primary things, then you simply need to find something. These days, this is very easy to do. We have very healthy, we were just talking about
Stevia.
Exactly.
My
Stevia
son,
is
I don't know
extremely
where
good.
this mom lives, but they make they do an excellent line of soft drinks sweetened with stevia. And Wyatt, that is his reward. He makes his own popsicles with them, which he gets freely.
Yes.
And I use a stevia, he gets a half a cup of his favorite ginger ale sweetened with stevia in the afternoon when he gets home from school.
That's
so, but
fantastic.
how would she may get some resistance initially substituting the drink. How do you
Right.
do that substitution?
Right. So two things. One is, I want to know where you get those drinks from.
I'll
because
tell
that's
you.
awesome.
Okay, I can give
first of all,
a shout out, can I, to a
Yeah,
store?
of course.
You get them. It's the Sprouts carries it, which I don't know
Oh,
how many
great,
places Sprouts
great.
is. They're very pro autism, by the way. They help.
Yes.
They do a lot for Autism Speaks. And Act Today has actually gotten a grant through Sprouts.
Yes.
And the Whole Foods.
Oh, great,
they're becoming
great.
very common. These
Great.
stevia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so.
stevia is very, very good for you. It has, there's no harmful
Right.
anything
Right.
about
So
it.
how would
It's
she
a plant.
substitute that out? Would it be
So
a
you-
process or an overnight thing?
I think what you can do is you can generally have his favorite drink as the reinforcer.
Okay.
This is called Premack principle, where you basically use a current reinforcer to reinforce
What's it called?
Premack.
Okay,
Premack.
What does that stand for?
It's the name of the guy who came up with
Oh,
this theory.
got it. Okay.
Premack. So what you do is you basically take a high-level behavior and you use it to reinforce a low-level behavior, and then the low-level behavior increases because
Okay.
of the conditioning. So
Okay.
what you do is you'll have, a small amount of this drink, the stevia drink, and then you'll have a lot of his drink.
Right.
And you'll tell him, if you want your drink,
All
the
right.
soda, the sweet drink, you'll have to have this one first.
Okay.
So he'll have this, and then he can get that. And then over the course of the week, you'll reduce the soda, the sweet one, and you'll increase the one with stevia. And before you know it, this one will have replaced the other one.
Okay, and what about, she says if she withholds his cell phone, she gets immediate compliance. Would there be, see, my thought would have been maybe to go to cold turkey. Well, if you drink this stevia drink today instead of this, Coke, you get your cell phone.
Right.
Would that work or no?
It might work, and it has a lot to do with the functioning of the child again, and we don't know the function of the child. And I always try to, there's two things. One is, you want to try to be fair, and you want to try to be reinforcing. So for me, if I take away a valued object and say, you have to do things my way, and then I'll give you back this valued object,
Right.
I am now associated with this ogre of a person who is now governing the child and all this sort of stuff. Whereas if I do it through a game of reducing this one and increasing this one, it's almost like the child has control over it themselves versus I've taken away control.
Right.
So I always try to do things in a way that the child feels like, I couldn't care less. They're about the same. I'm fine with this. And they make the choice. When you force the child to do things, however, even if it's something that's necessary, if you force it on them, there's always an immediate defense mechanism of, I don't want to do it just because you're forcing me. So I always try to avoid that. But having said that, if this is an almost typical teenager, then of course, then it becomes a lot easier, because then you can actually make a list of things that are required for having one hour of their cell phone. I mean, you could make all kinds of token economies, but it really just depends on the level of functioning of this child.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we will be back with more of Ask Dr. Doreen.
It's every parent's desire for their child to have a great start in life. Yet there is a condition affecting more children's lives than pediatric cancer, diabetes, and AIDS combined. Autism strikes 1 in every 150 children.
Today, 1 in 110 kids in the U.S. will be diagnosed with autism. That is a huge jump from 30 years ago when it was 1 in 30,000.
Startling new report finds the number of children with autism is skyrocketing. The Centers for Disease Control estimates 1 in 68 children has a form of autism. Now that's a 30% increase in just 2 years.
Well, a lot of this is with all the accomplishments over the last 20 years. I'm thrilled.
I think what kept me was the feeling that, I would have a parent come to my office late at night at UCLA and just fall apart. And this is a long time ago, and there were much less back then in terms of services and knowledge and so on. And I would just sit with the family and the parents and walk them through and try to take away some of their fears, and at that point I realized, I think the thing that's actually most important to me is that process. I mean, thank God that I've been very, very lucky and blessed to have so many incredible clinicians join me along the way and just develop CARD in such an amazing, magnificent way. That I could, for me, it was more really about how can I help the families? What can I do for the moms, the dads? It is just, and I feel like, there's no way I would ever really know, because I haven't had my own child go through this, but I've experienced it with people a lot of times.
Hi, this is Megan. I'm in first grade all by myself. My teachers are so fabulous. I like to read books. I like to go to my friends' birthday parties. I like to invite my friends to my birthday parties. I once had a
Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. I am filling in for my dear friend and colleague, Shannon Penrod, who's under the weather today. Shannon, we hope you get better. We miss you. And I'm here with Dr. Doreen Grampachet, who is answering your questions about your kiddos. And we have from a viewer, hi ladies, thank you for your show. How do I help my son tell me about his day? I have the same problem. This child is younger. He's at a typical K class. He just started. One teacher, 17 kids. He didn't qualify for an aide. Any tips with getting answers about his day?
Yeah, so it's a little bit harder to do this because you're not in class with him, but if he's in a typical K class, that means he's in 30 hours a week, so it's full day almost. And so I think what would be helpful is some sort of a visual schedule to help him. And he's in a typical class, so I'm guessing he's pretty high functioning. We have a lot of prerequisite lessons that come before the lesson I'm just about to talk about.
Okay.
So with this lesson, what you do is you basically have segments of the day that have to do with his school. So for instance, circle time. Maybe they start usually with, the national anthem, and then they'll have like a little section which is just talking about the calendar, maybe is the first one, and then there's like circle time, and then there's like maybe, I don't know, stations, and then there's whatever it is. So you find out exactly from the school, and you segment it into like 10 different, all the different activity changes, including lunch, recess, whatever it is, and you put them out on a piece of paper, and if he can read, great, you just write the title. If he can't, then you take a photo of something at school that resembles that activity. So like all the kids playing outside, or all the kids sitting at lunch, or all the kids at their stations, or all the kids sitting around the teacher when they're doing calendar, so that your son can recognize exactly which segment you're talking about. And you put the photos on a big board like this, and then when your son comes home, you ask him to tell you one thing that happened in each of those segments. And that way he will be forced to talk about it.
Right, and visually, since our kids generally tend to be more visual learners, that's a great prompt for him.
Yeah, it's just that, like, when you say what happened in today, that's today means nothing to our kids. So it's kind of like making it mean something. Means, what did you do during this time, this time, this time, this time? And then what I find to be very helpful and very important, because you also at the same time kind of want to teach your child, and again, this has to do with the functioning level. So you initially just want the child to kind of vocalize something about each activity. But the more important thing is that in normal conversation, when you ask a child, what did you do today? They only tell you the important things. This is called saliency. They don't tell you, and then I went to the bathroom, and then they don't tell you all the details. They just tell you, a kid like threw up in class today, like they tell you the important things.
Right.
So you have to, if you have this table, let's say, if you're depending on the level of the child, after he's able to tell you one or more things in each segment of the day, then you really want to like help him understand what the important ones are, because he's told you now everything, and you'll say, okay, so is this one a big thing or a little thing? Is this important or it's not important? And you know which ones are important because he's already told you. So you'll help him highlight those. And then you'll ask him at the very end, you'll say, okay, so what did you do today? And then he'll tell you the important ones. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
So it's kind of like you help him visualize everything that just happened, and then to identify the important ones, and then to respond with the important ones. Now, this is important in everything you teach him from that point forward. Like summarizing a story, reading comprehension, it all has to do with being able to pick out the important features of what you just read.
Right.
So finding the important things in a bunch of dialogue is also just a very important skill. It has its own value. And of course, just to be able to vocalize a bunch of stuff about each segment has to have prerequisites, right? You have to have enough language. You have to be able to express things in a sentence format, perhaps describe things that you saw. All of this is a little hard if you have absolutely no contact with school. So, I think the parent said he didn't qualify for an aid, which
Right.
hopefully means that he's high functioning
Right.
enough,
Right.
and you don't really need an aid. Sometimes we can't teach our kids these things unless we have a little bit of help at school, someone who can actually prompt the child at the time.
Right.
This is what we're doing.
Well, I'm going to ask you for selfish purposes.
Sure.
When I pick up Wyatt, and Wyatt's 14, I say, how was school today? And, tell me about, what you did in your classes. And he says, I don't want to talk, Mom. He wants to
Right.
listen to his music.
Right.
I want to be quiet right now.
Right.
Now, how do I deal with that?
Okay. So his music, I assume, is with you?
Yes, he's in
Okay.
the back. He sits in the back so he can...
And you give it to he gains
has his
access
own
once
iPhone.
he enters.
Yep.
But he doesn't have it at school.
No.
Okay, perfect. So what you do is you take his iPhone and all that sort of stuff and
Right.
just keep it in the front, keep it in your hand.
Okay.
When he gets in, you ask him, tell me one thing.
Okay, he's going to get a little annoyed probably.
That's totally
Say,
fine.
I don't want to talk about it.
You
And
say-
maybe raise his voice.
And then you'll hold the iPhone up and you'll say, I need one thing. And he'll tell you one thing.
Okay.
And then you'll give him his iPhone and leave him alone.
All right.
And then you'll do that for a whole week, maybe
Okay.
2.
Okay.
And then when he will get to when you do it enough, he'll be an automatic. He'll sit in and tell you one thing, and you'll give him the iPhone. That's when you make it 2 things.
Okay.
And then you just keep
build.
going up a little bit until it's reasonable. Don't make it be a list of 10 things.
Okay.
Make it reasonable. Now, what's more important for Wyatt's level is that he will immediately figure out, because he's smart.
How to get his way.
He'll immediately figure out how to give you something which may have not even happened. And that's the key with him. You really need to know that it was something that happened.
Okay.
And I don't know,
I can check, with the teachers or the aide.
Exactly.
Communication
That's
there.
very important because if I know him,
Uh-huh.
he'll just blurt something else in order to get his iPhone.
Right, because he's smart. Is it something that a therapist could do with a child as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely, of course.
Go over their schedule and say, can you tell
Definitely.
me a little bit about what you did in,
absolutely.
math today and what you did in reading and what you did?
I mean,
okay.
it's one of our lessons, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about, and it goes
Right,
into
right.
detailed activities. And if the child doesn't have the skill at all, you can certainly practice it at home with other things. Like, for instance, you have a whole Saturday. You can segment the weekend, and you can say, first we had breakfast, then we had this, and you can do this with your child so he understands the concept. So you'll list out all the segments of a weekend, let's say
Right.
Saturday, Sunday, like morning breakfast, then we went out shopping, then we went to the park, whatever, right?
Uh-huh.
And then you'll ask the child, so what did we do here? And he'll
Right.
say something, and maybe he won't know. Maybe he won't know what you're asking, so you can help him.
Right.
Because you were there.
Right,
you
and
can
iPhones
say,
are great because you can take a picture and
Totally,
you can show the
totally.
child the picture and
Exactly.
say, remember this and tell me about
Perfect,
it,
right? And you can say, okay, see, like we went out for breakfast, and then have him say, we went out for breakfast. So you can practice this with him for time segments where you are with him.
Right.
And then when you do it for time segments like school when you're not, he'll at least know the concept. It'll be a lot easier for
Okay.
him.
All right, next question. Thank you for your show. My son is 5, finally playing with toys and wanting to play with kids and initiating. Bravo.
Great.
His expressive language is still behind, though its like language hasn't clicked yet. He has difficulty with conversational mainly. He gets his needs met, but he can't socialize as much as he wants because he lacks conversational skills. Please help. What else can I do?
Right. So this is really, really important because he's now started to initiate and he's very interested in playing with other kids. This is probably the series of lessons and activities that you do now are what will make a huge difference in his life, because this is the phase where you remain either sort of rote and on the spectrum, or you actually learn abstract concepts. Conversation, I've often talked about this, involves at least 10 or more sub-activities. So these are, for example, when we have a typical conversation, they involve appropriate eye contact,
Right.
like being able to look at people when you're talking to them. appropriate distance, so like physical proximity, standing to people, and actually that changes when it's a group versus one person. So knowing the difference between how close you stand and how much eye contact you give to one person if you're talking to one person versus a group of kids. How to enter a conversation, which is very important, and like you will you can't just blurt in, you know, you have to like wait your turn and you have to find a moment and then you have to introduce it through some concept. Like, by the way, guys, last night I saw whatever. You can't just jump in and talk about a show you saw. You have to introduce it. And you have to introduce it in a way that's relevant. So the topic has to somehow, you can't, something has to allow you an entrance. And those are cues that we teach the child. And then once you've introduced it, you have to look for body language. You have to look for responses. So you have to be able to see how people are responding. Are they interested or not? I mean, obviously, you have to have the conversational skills, the language skills to say a few things, you know, like, hey, I had cereal for breakfast. What did you guys have? Or, you know, time sequence, like yesterday I did blah, blah, blah. So you have to have those content skills, obviously.
Right.
And so now you've said your part and you've looked at everybody else's reactions. Now there's all these other things you have to be able to do. Like, what if people have a reaction that indicates they did not understand you? You have to be able to clarify. What if they have a reaction that says what you said was boring to them, they're about to walk away? You have to be able to repair conversation. What if they have a reaction like they're hurt? You have to be able to improve upon and make it more empathetic how you said things. But I mean, so people's reactions then produce your next communication. Your first communication, in other words, your first statement, for this, so here are the phases. How do I enter? And that has a whole bunch of stuff around it. And it's like, what should be my first sentence? And that has a whole bunch of stuff around it. Like, how do I introduce it? Should it, you know, is it appropriate to this audience? Like, am I, like, for instance, if you're talking to other kids, you're going to say things in a certain way versus if you're talking to a teacher. Now, these are very important lessons. So, and then how do they react and how do I react to that? Now, all of these, I mean, I mentioned literally maybe 20 lessons just going through this, you know, and they can't be taught all at once.
Okay.
So in order, you first have to make sure there's enough conversational content. So language is there. Like the child can describe things, can talk about past tense, can sequence events that occurred, can refer to things that were in the past, like abstract concepts. It has enough adjectives, descriptors, you know, appropriate language. So that's there. Then you have to work on all the physical components of entering a conversation. That's what we call it. It's a whole section of our curriculum called How to Enter Conversation. It's multiple lessons. And then you have to look at the introductory statements, appropriate introductory statements and introductory body language, contextual cues, all of that. And then you have to look at reading other people's reactions and then appropriate dialogue after that. Because someone walks away, your next statement's going to be, oh, hey, you want to talk about something else? Or, hey, where are you going? Can I join you? Or, you know, whatever it is. Whereas if someone gives you a question, then you just answer the question. So all of your behavior after your first statement has to do with their response.
Okay.
And that's conversation. And conversation is not an easy thing. Now, what was the age? 5. At 5 already, it's astonishing the complexity of conversation amongst typically developing 5-year-olds.
Okay.
And I think, you know, to help you as a parent, I think what you should do is just do an observation, if you can, of 2 or 3 other 5-year-olds. And, you know, if they allow you, record it, and then go home and just look at the subsections of what they're talking about. Content-wise, it's always important to talk about the same things, right? Like, what is the fad right now? What are the things that 5-year-olds are talking about? That's incredibly important. Just like with any child. I look at my kids who are teenagers or in their 20s, and you look at it and they're like, they have completely different words, even, Nancy, you know, that we didn't even know about. But anyway, it's important to have
Like
the
twerking.
the Twitter handle. Yesterday I was out with my daughters and they were like, "What's your handle?" I'm like,
right.
handle?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so all that sort of stuff is important content-wise, but it's all this peripheral stuff is what makes conversation normal.
Well, how does this mom, I mean, she doesn't say what kind of program she has for him.
Right.
She doesn't, what would you suggest she do to work on this?
I would really, the best thing you can do, honestly, is go on Skills. Go become a member, or just for 1 month, go on Skills. It is skillsforautism.com. And go answer questions about your child, which is a lot of questions. And right now I think we have two options. It's a short assessment or a long assessment. Doesn't really matter. I always recommend the long assessment just because it does take a lot of time, but it is much more comprehensive and it gives you a much better picture of your child. But then ultimately you want to go into the I would say, I think it's in the social curriculum, and you can actually do a drop-down menu and see all the different curriculum areas. The social curriculum, I think, or it could be in language, is a section called conversation. And when you go into conversation, you'll see all these lessons, and it'll tell you which order to teach which one, how to teach each one, and it's a lot of work. I mean, don't expect this to happen like overnight. This is months of teaching before all the skills come together.
Right.
But it's totally doable. I mean, I love having conversations with our older kids or our recovered kids, and it's just always interesting for me how you can tell that they're actively thinking, but they're so good. They're so good, you know.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. There's a lot of questions still to get to. We'll be back with more of Ask Dr. Doreen.
Hi everyone, welcome back. For the month of March, we're going to be making a rain stick. And what's really cool about this project is that the steps are pretty simple, so your kids are going to be able to practice a lot of their fine motor skills when making it. Another bonus is that once the rain stick is completed, you guys can use it for a bunch of different programs under cognition and executive functions, things that deals with, seeing versus hearing, or using it also for auditory memory. But we'll get to that later. First, we gotta make the rain stick. So the materials you'll be needing are a paper towel roll, tape, paper, aluminum foil, rice, and any kind of materials you want to use to decorate your rain stick with. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing you wanna do is get a piece of tin foil that's about double the length as your paper towel roll. I got this, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna roll it up, like so, and I'm gonna wrap my paper towel roll with it. Okay, and don't worry if it's too messy, okay? This is just to give us a basic shape. Now once I've got this, I'm gonna make it a little bit tighter, and I'm gonna roll it and stick it inside of my paper towel roll. I want to make sure that it goes all the way through the paper towel roll, and what this does, it acts like a buffer so the rice will go down slowly through the tube. And see how that's nice and in there? Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to take a piece of paper and cover one side, and I'm going to take a piece of tape and secure it over the bottom. All right, now that I've got this on, I'm gonna take my rice and pour it in. All right, now that I got the rice in there, I'm gonna seal the other side. Now that this is constructed, don't forget to use your imagination to decorate this any way that you want. And here's my finished rain stick. Don't forget you can decorate yours however you see fit. I decided to use tape and pipe cleaners, but you could always paint it, add sparkles, just whatever you feel like doing. Now that this is done, let's take a listen to it. What does that sound like to you? I think it sounds like rain too. What does rain look like? Ah, that is what rain looks like. You can ask them a whole bunch of different questions using this after it's already been made. Well, until next time, craft on. Bye, guys.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
We are back with Ask Dr. Doreen. I am filling in, Nancy Jackson, filling in for my friend and colleague Shannon Penrod. And Doreen, we have a question from a viewer who says their 12-year-old son has autism and Down syndrome. He is nonverbal, not toilet trained. He hits himself in the head several times a day. I usually block it. He has a communication device, but only uses it to request his favorite snack. We have ABA, but only 2.5 hours per week. Can you recommend what we should focus on first? Thanks for your amazing advice.
Oh my gosh. Okay, honestly, you should focus on increasing your hours. Forget about everything else. You should focus on getting, a child with autism alone should be getting much, much more than this. And when you have Down syndrome on top of that, you really, and he will qualify. I don't know where you are. Please write into us. I really want to help you. Just let Shannon know exactly where you are so we can at least help you get funding, because it's so important that you get more hours. There's so much you can do. 2.5 hours, it's virtually impossible to do anything with 2.5 hours because ABA requires consistency. Your child, if you do 2.5 hours, your child will figure out that during those 2.5 hours, I need to behave. The rest of the time, I can do whatever I want to do. And it's just not going to be enough. If you had more hours, I would recommend you focus on the aggressive behavior.
Yeah. And toilet training.
Oh my gosh, yes. Which really, the aggressive behavior is a result of not communicating properly.
Of course.
And yes, as Nancy said, toilet training. Imagine how much easier your life would be and his life would be.
We've got to get you help. And please, as Doreen said, reach out to Shannon and they can help you. And let me just say that if for some reason you can't get this ABA, please, they'll let me know, and let's talk about getting you a grant through Act Today. I have a special place in my heart for you, to this mom. My brother had Down syndrome, and I believe was probably had an autism diagnosis, was never formally diagnosed. And of course, I have a child with autism, so Down syndrome and autism, I mean, I pray for you, and you have a tremendous courage. We want to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Dear Shannon and Dr. Grandpichet, please help my 14-year-old high school freshman who is very hardworking and has a heart of gold. In conversations, his responses appear like he didn't hear parts of the question or didn't understand. Could it be my son hears us speaking like the Charlie Brown adults? What are the possible causes? How can we determine if it's hearing issues, auditory processing, recall, attention, or question mark? Thank you for your advice and positive energy. Thankful to learn from your answers. Shannon, your parent perspective and passion are very helpful. You are all amazing. Thank you. And Shannon, she is amazing.
Yeah.
Doreen, what do you
agree.
say about this 14-year-old who is having a hard time with responses?
Right. I mean, and
hearing.
And yeah, thank you very much for listening to our all of our other viewers as well, and we appreciate your positive comments. So, it could be any of those issues, obviously. So let's go through them. And you know, you clearly have a lot of expertise here, or understanding, a very good depth of understanding in regards to what it could be. Hearing issues, very, very easy. You just go and see an audiologist, and they will test his hearing. It's least likely that it's a hearing issue, but you never know. You never know, and it's important to rule these things out. So. You do an audiogram. It's one of those rooms where they have different items in the corners, and items light up or make noise, and we have to look and see where he looks at. There's also, you can also see, we do this at our assessment center. There's a lot of sound discrimination tests. So you basically say and or play various sounds and the person, or words, and we want to see, like, for instance, I'll say, I remember when I used to do a lot of testing, I would you know, there's pictures on a board and you say things like moon, and then you want to make sure that the child touches the picture of the moon versus, let's say, a cow, because what they're hearing is moo. They're not hearing the ending N, you know, and so there's sound discrimination tests like that can also be done. It is important. You'd be shocked that some of our kids actually have sound discrimination issues. They don't hear certain words. So let's get that out. Auditory processing is very complex. Again, an audiologist can help a little bit with this because this has more to do with the deciphering of sounds in the environment and identifying which are the salient sounds or the prevalent sounds. So, for instance, right now in this room where we're producing this show, we have a lot of different sounds, but we don't pay attention to them because we're paying attention to my vocalization. Now, if I stop for a minute, the first sound you hear is the air. Right. And those are background noises to us, which we've learned, this is auditory processing, we've learned to wash it out, like ignore it when there's language. Now, an interesting thing is one of my recovered kids said to me that it was the opposite for him. For him, language was one of those background noises, and all the other sounds were way more prevalent, and it was a real active. He had to force himself to learn to listen to the other one more.
Oh, I see. So it's like an auditory overload of the background, just like sometimes our kids have a visual overload.
Exactly.
Of certain things.
Absolutely, and it's kind of instead of, and when you do their audiogram, you sometimes see that those particular decibels of sound are equal with other decibels of sound, whereas it shouldn't be. Like, you know, human beings, we develop, and sometimes this, Nancy, has to do with the fact that a lot of our kids have hearing ear infections when they're very young. Yes. And they actually develop with a muffled sound. During their developmental years, they're hearing muffled language. And so the inner hair cells of the inner ear don't develop the way they should. And so we learn to become more sensitive towards background noise, muffled noises, rather than language noises.
So an audiologist, you said?
An audiologist can help
She needs to go
a little bit
first.
with that. And you can help with this. You can figure this one out if it is or isn't auditory processing, because the way to do that is two ways. And your child is old enough, 14, so, and he's a high school freshman. So definitely, if typical kids who have problems with auditory processing, there's two things about it. One is they do much better in quiet environments. So in other words, if their TV is on and let's say you have music in the kitchen and he's sitting in the living room and you call his name and there's like two other types of stimuli, like TV and music, or the gardeners in the backyard, two or three other types of stimuli, is it harder for him to turn around and focus or hear you than when it's completely quiet? That is a trigger for there's something wrong with auditory processing. Second one is if you give him a visual, does he do better? If you tell him something versus write something, and he always does better once he reads it, that's auditory processing. Now, if you determine that it is auditory processing, there's a whole bunch of activities you can do for auditory processing. We have some of them in our skills. If you go and look under, I think it would be in our executive functioning curriculum, there's a whole section for attention and processing, and all of that, this type of activity would be in there, listed in there. Otherwise, the other issue is, of course, recall or attention. Those types of, and actually auditory processing as well, those all come out in testing. So you would need to see a psychologist who can do testing. Most of this is done in either executive functioning tests or IQ tests. Intelligence tests measure things like processing, modality of processing, processing speed. They also look at things like recall ability, memory, working memory, attention, and many types of attention. For instance, they'll give you a computerized test which actually tells you, is the child paying attention to all the stimuli in his environment, a percentage of the stimuli, is he processing slower than the environment, faster than the environment? These are very, very important and can tell you quite a lot about your child.
Could this also not, though, be a way, an escape?
I
mean, maybe
it totally could be, and thank you for bringing that up. Of course, it could be
because the child doesn't want to talk.
Yes, or is it that he doesn't want to talk, or
it says he appears he didn't hear parts of the question or didn't understand. I just wonder because sometimes Wyatt does that. He'll say, "I don't know," or he won't respond, and he just doesn't want to respond, and it's an avoidance.
Right, and I think always you will figure that out if it is avoidance, because once you write it out, they tend to respond, or they just object and say, "I don't want to talk to you."
Right.
So, but it is a good point. I think you should also consider the fact that we were just talking about this on break, that sometimes our kids just get tired of having someone in their face all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll say, "I don't know," just to get out of it, out of a situation.
Okay.
But these are very important things to know. And, you know, I don't know where you are, but we have fantastic psychologists. I always love talking to our psychologists. I learn so much from them. Yesterday I was talking to one of our psychologists here, and he was telling me about just kind of all the different aspects of fluency. And it's amazing how much information we get from testing. And it's important to benefit from that. In fact, I want you to bring Wyatt in for some testing.
Okay, great. All right, here's a simple question. Do you have a training video on errorless learning and or functional communication training? Thanks, Kelly.
Functional communication. I don't know if we have a training. Okay, so yes, we do in IBT, an Institute for Behavioral Training. So you would go to ibehavioraltraining.com. And there you will find definitely a module on errorless learning. I don't know if there's a module on functional communication. If there is, it's most likely under the adult section, because we do a lot of functional communication training for adults. But also, you're looking more for sort of process rather than content. So yeah, I would look on the IBT website.
All right, we have only about 2 minutes. I'm going to try to get to a couple here that are quick answers. Is behavior therapy as effective for adults with autism as it is for children?
It absolutely is. The effectiveness doesn't matter what the age is. It's definitely as effective. The issue with adults is that there's just more to teach. So, you know, as you said, White started when he was 5 or 5.5. And we can teach just so much. When the child is 2, we have 3 more years to teach, and it's easier to teach a 2-year-old, because what your goal is to try to turn them into a 5-year-old by the time they become 5. You're trying to merge the mental age and the chronological age. So like if you have a 5-year-old who's functioning like a 2-year-old, it's easier to get them together to reach to the same age. But if you're starting, let's say, with a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, it's very hard to teach a 10-year-old everything a typical 10-year-old does. It's impossible. There's just not enough hours in the day. Whereas it is possible to teach a 2-year-old to start behaving like a 3-year-old. And like a 4-year-old and like a 5-year-old. So that's why early is better, because you just have more time.
But everyone can benefit. Adults, everybody. And particularly when it comes to problem behaviors, this can be so effective and so necessary.
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Kelby, we don't really have time for one more, do we? Unless it's really quick. Well, I don't think we've got a really quick one. I hope that Shannon can get to these next week.
Yeah, no problem. We always do our best to get to the questions.
And these are just great questions. And Doreen, you are such a wealth of information. I encourage parents to watch this show every week. Because you can learn so much from a world expert in behavior therapy.
It's a pleasure.
And
it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot during this hour.
Thank you.
And we will see you next week when Shannon is back.
Thank you very much.
And please stay tuned, because we're going to be back after a break with Let's Talk Autism. I have a documentary producer who has done an amazing film on adults with autism. And we've got a lot in the news, including the top newsmaker these days, Mr. Trump, who is saying some pretty pretty crazy things about who might head up the NIH. We don't know if it's true or not. We'll get into that. We'll be back.
There's Miss Jessica. Hello. Say hi. What is it? What's that? Giraffe. He's getting really good at that. What's that guy? Who's this guy?
We have this one program called NVI, which is non-vocal imitation. So he basically has to imitate whatever we do. So we were working on object manipulation, and then Tuesday I tried doing more gross motor things like clapping hands or standing or jumping, and he was able to imitate all of those. Ready? Do this! Yay! Very good! Okay, here you go. Who's hiding now? Me? Do this! Good job! Okay, here you go. Okay, let's do another one. Ready? Do this! Yay! All right! Here you go, Rockstar. Oh, that's so cool. Alrighty, ready? Do this. Good job! Very good. So that was actually a fine motor action with a touch nose. Oh, yeah! How did that happen? You want more? You want more of this? More? Okay. Good asking. We'll do a couple more actions, okay? Do this. Good job. Do this. Good job. Do this. Good try. Here. Can you try? Do this. There you go. All right. Here we go. He's been doing a lot more on his own, even just when I attempt him by just holding the object, not necessarily asking him to imitate more. Cat, that's right. He does do it on his own now, which is really cool. Good asking, buddy. Ouch. Why not up?
That one's up. Oh, there you go. See? How many up do you want to go?
Touch the block. God, what is it? Good job.
Sorry, I'm just curious.
Okay. I'm interested too. Touch shoes. Where's the shoes? That's a good try. Okay. Let's see. Can you touch crab? Where's the crab? Can you touch it with your finger though? Thank you. Did you see that? What is it? Crab. Say crab. That was so funny. I didn't specify, huh? Touch block. Good job. What is it? What is this? Block. This is his receptive labels, so what I just did basically. And our supervisor had written down things that's in his environment that he might not know or that he might know the labels to, or if he's just seen it or heard the label for it, not necessarily know how to say it per se. And I just went through block, guitar, bear, plane, cat with him, and so he actually knows all of them. So I'm actually going to go through his environment just to see other things like shoes. He actually knew almost everything on here except fork, I think. Yeah. So that's actually really impressive. You amaze me every day, kiddo.
We're taking a walk. We just finished dinner, getting ready to go to bed. But part of our after dinner tradition suddenly has been to take a walk. Make sure. Say, come on, Mama. Come on, Mama. Right, Jack? And then we say, stop. Go. practicing our stops and goes. Stop. Good stopping. Go. Stop. Good stopping, Jack. Stop. Good stopping. Good job, love. Look at me. Say bye-bye.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Nancy and no Shannon. I'm sorry to say, my dear friend and colleague is out with, she's feeling under the weather this morning, and I encouraged her to stay home. I miss her. I hope I did her justice in this last hour with Dr. Doreen. Shannon's far more knowledgeable than I am on ABA, but Doreen was such a wealth of information. So I hope you always tune into that each and every Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And now we are turning to Let's Talk Autism. And I'm going to start with, in the news, some very provocative articles coming out about Donald Trump, which is no surprise. Wherever we have Donald Trump, we seem to have controversy, don't we? One article says that Donald Trump is about to make another idiotic move. He believes that appointing radical right-wing radio host Michael Savage to head the National Institutes of Health would bring some much-needed common sense to the agency. According to Media Matters for America, Savage believes that autism is one big lie. It's a huge racket in the medical industry, according to Savage, and essentially doesn't exist. In 2008, he made the following statements. I'll tell you what autism is. In 9% of the cases, it's a brat who hasn't been told to cut the act out. That's what autism is. What do you mean? They scream and they're silent. They don't have a father around to tell them, don't act like a moron. You'll get nowhere in life. Stop acting like a putz. Straighten up. Act like a man. Don't sit there crying and screaming. Idiot. Okay, Mr. Savage, I would like you to walk a mile in an autism parent's shoes, or even a minute for that matter. But there was a massive backlash following that statement. ABC News reported that he doubled down on his offensive and ignorant remarks, saying, "My comments about autism were meant to boldly awaken parents and children to the medical community's attempt to label too many children or adults as autistic, just as some drug companies have overdiagnosed ADD and ADHD to peddle dangerous speed-like drugs to children as young as 4 years of age. This cartel of doctors, drug companies, is now creating a national panic by overdosing autism, for which there is no definitive medical diagnosis." Hello, where have you been, Mr. Savage, on that front? We do know that he said all of those things. What we don't know is really what the true story is with Trump. We don't know, in fact, that Trump has gone on the line saying he wants Savage to head up the NIH crowd, head up the NIH. And there's another article out of the Inquisitor saying that in an October 6th interview with Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, syndicated radio host Michael Savage mentioned that he hopes Trump will appoint him as the National Institute of Health director. Trump didn't deny outright the radio host request, and that has many people wondering if this might become a reality. Media Matters for America reports that Savage offered to become head of the NIH when and if Trump becomes president. Savage holds degrees in medical botany, I guess he knows a lot about marijuana, medical anthropology, and nutritional ethnomedicine, I'm not really sure what that is, and asserted he would be the best man for the job. When you become president, I want you to consider appointing me to head the NIH, is what Savage said to Mr. Trump. I will make sure that America has real science and real medicine again in this country because I know the corruption. I know how to clean it up, and I know how to make real research work again. Trump acknowledged Savage's request with a positive reply, yet the response was more of a courteous comment rather than a commitment. I think it goes a little beyond courteous, though. He said, "I think that's great." And I think that, frankly, well, you know, you'd get common sense if that were the case, that I can tell you because I hear so much about the NIH, and it's terrible. Okay, so we're not really sure where the truth lies, although we do know that Donald Trump said to Michael Savage, who has denied autism as a condition, who has called our children spoiled brats, who has called out parents on not good parenting skills, we do know that Donald Trump said to him, "I think that's great." Enough. No commentary there. Okay, the next story is studying prodigies could be a key to an autism breakthrough. This is from the Business Insider. Two academics, David Feldman and Martha Morlock, once complained, only somewhat facetiously, that divine inspiration, reincarnation, or magical incantation were the best explanation for child prodigies. Science had no real explanation for that. But now psychologist Joanne Ruth Schatz, excuse me, Joanne, if I botched your name, developed a startling hunch after a chance encounter with a music prodigy's autistic cousin. Could autism have something to do with prodigious talent? The answer seems to be yes. Autism prodigies don't typically have autism, but many prodigies have autistic relatives, brothers, sisters, uncles, grandmothers. Some have autism in every twig and branch of the family tree. Bottom line on this is the Ohio State University team and Dr. Ruth Schatz are studying a chromosome mutation, chromosome 1, a mutation on chromosome 1, that some prodigies and autist, it's an interesting term, autist, share. The connection's fascinating. It offers an unexpected perspective on the riddle of the prodigy's talent, intriguing take on what drives children to hone their skills with laser-like focus and intensity. So because they appear to share this gene on chromosome 1, they have a common foundation. So there is going to be ongoing research on this to see that if there is any commonality between prodigies and autistic individuals. So hopefully we'll hear more on that. Now we always like to give you good news to start in the news. And what's not to love about Adele? Her voice, her personality, everything about her. She's just such a stunning talent. And she fulfilled the dream of a 12-year-old girl with autism. She invited her on stage. When Emily Tammin came to a recent Adele show at a Manchester, England arena, she had one goal: to perform on stage with her favorite artist, Adele. Armed with a sign that read, "It is my dream to sing with Adele," the 12-year-old British girl stood in the crowd and waited for her moment. With just a few songs left in the show, the 25 artist finally spotted Tammin's sign. She invited her up on stage to sing. She proceeded to belt out an impressive rendition of "Someone Like You" as the audience erupted in cheers. How great is that? Also, Tammin's father told the Manchester Evening News that the moment was particularly special because she does have autism, that Adele had no idea about that fact. It was later revealed. She also has ADHD and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, type 3, a condition that causes chronic pain and limb weakness. Adele was so nice to do that, said the dad. She clearly didn't have to. Emily said she wants to show people that have disabilities or mental issues they can still do mainstream things like singing. They should not be stopped from doing them. So, Emily, we are so happy for you today. And Adele, once again, you approved. You are not only one of the most beautiful voices we have ever heard in the history of music, you are a class act. I am going to take a break now, and when we come back, I believe, I lost my IFB for a minute, Kelby, we're going to get Jack Creamer. He's going to be joining us via Skype. He's an Emmy Award-winning producer, videographer, and editor based out of Denver, Colorado. And he now has produced his first documentary feature film. It's called Programming Hope, and it's about employment and autism, and it's a very important subject matter. We're going to find out what inspired Jack to make this film and how you can see it and what it's all about. So stay with us. And Shannon Penrod, if you're watching from home, I miss you. We'll be back.
What would you do if your child was hurting?
If your family's future was uncertain.
If help seemed out of reach.
Have you been given no hope?
Taka means I am not alone in this.
This is the reality for families affected by autism. And today, the number of children with autism is growing more rapidly than ever. Taka unites these families and shows that they do not have to fight this battle alone.
Our oldest son, Jared, who has autism, when we first took him to the doctor to get the diagnosis, you know, it's so sad because they offer you nothing. There's no help, there's no hope.
One of the things that you learn with autism is being very grateful for even the small milestones. You know, when you first get the diagnosis, you go through all the range of emotions. You know, this can't be happening. Why is this happening? You have to get to a point where it's the emotion that has to be leading is, what can I do? The first thing that struck me was walking to a room and seeing, oh my gosh, we're not alone. And there is this very strong community that's already set. And something I still today associate with Taka the most is hope. To me, that's what Taka means. Taka means hope.
It's like you've got all these dreams and goals of what your son's going to do, and you get your diagnosis and you're sent home. And that's it. There's no plan of action. There's no, here's autism, here's what we're going to do to make your life better and help him. It's strictly go home and try to process it and go on the internet. It was devastating, and you just, you know, you go through this 3-week of depression, and then you snap out of it. You have to. And then you start making phone calls and trying to figure out what is autism and what are we going to do. And then we found Taka, and it was life-changing.
Autism, there really is no definitive answer. It is trying to find the resources that are out there that can assist you to help your child so that, you know, you just don't feel so helpless at those particular moments.
There was direction, and there was hope, and there was a little ray of sunshine that he's going to be okay, and we're going to be okay. I always look back and think we would never be where we are. Carson wouldn't be where he is at without Taka.
So 13 years ago, my son was diagnosed with autism, and that put our whole family into a tailspin. There were so many different ideas and things that were not proven. Nobody knew what guidance to give us. We had no direction. And then we found Taka. They helped give us a path to follow, help give our son a better future and make him healthy and put him back onto the road of recovery. When your son's first diagnosed, the first thing you hope for is, gosh, I just want my son to speak. I just want to be able to communicate with him in some way. Then you want a little more. You want him to go to a regular school. Then you want him to potentially have a real life and go to college. So you're always hoping for the future of your child. My son is a happy, healthy, vibrant young boy that's going to turn 15 really soon. And we couldn't be more pleased, and without Taka, I don't think we'd be in the place that we are today. We believe the future is not defined for many affected by autism. There is hope and direction for these kids and their families. Taka is dedicated to providing community, support, education, and hope to families affected by autism.
At Taka?
At Taka.
At Taka,
we are families with autism helping.
Helping.
Helping families.
helping families with autism.
Hi, my name is Matt. I am 19 years old and I was diagnosed with autism when I was 6 years old. Autism is one of the fastest growing developmental disabilities in the United States, but I am living proof that with the right treatment, hope is possible. My future is not limited. Today, I am attending Fullerton Community College and I run for the cross-country team for fun with my friends. It makes me feel proud when I think about my progress. Chances are you know someone affected by autism. Show them they are not alone and help others get on the road to recovery. Contribute to talk about curing autism today.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I am missing my partner in crime here, Shannon Penrod. She is out feeling under the weather this morning, so let's all send our healing energy to Shannon so we can get her back. We miss her enormously. I might even have to call into her at the end of the show just to talk to her and find out how I did on Ask Dr. Doreen. It just feels so strange not to have her next to me. Anyway, we are, as promised, we are back with our guest, Jack Creamer. Jack is an Emmy Award-winning producer, editor, videographer. He is based in Denver, Colorado. He's a 1991 graduate of Texas A&M, started his career in local television as a sports photographer and producer. In 2003, he used those skills to launch Creek Tree Films, and he produced a documentary called Programming Hope. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. Jack, first of all, Programming Hope, your first documentary. Tell us about it. What is it about?
Programming Hope was basically made to kind of put a spotlight on employment issues for adults on the spectrum. It's kind of a positive, uplifting look at one particular place that's had a lot of success employing adults on the spectrum. So it's about the Nonpareil Institute, which trains and employs adults to develop apps and video games for iPads, iPhones, Android phones, all that kind of thing.
Okay, great. We're going to get into Nonpareil in more detail in a moment. Tell us a little bit about employment and autism. What are the facts and the figures on autism and employment with young adults and beyond?
Well, some of the facts are that 90% of adults that are on the spectrum are either unemployed or underemployed. So they may have jobs that, you know, are way below their skill sets, or they have trouble keeping a job. You know, if you talk to some of these guys, you know, they may have had, you know, 6, 7, 8 jobs in a short period of time because they didn't fit their skill sets, or they weren't interested in what they were doing, or there was a lack of understanding from the employer about the accommodations that maybe need to be made for somebody that's on the spectrum. Or the other issue is maybe that individual doesn't want to let their employer know that they're on the spectrum. Maybe they have Asperger's, they're high functioning, and they can kind of get by. But then there's a misunderstanding from the employer about why they may do certain things or act a certain way, and maybe that particular job just doesn't fit them.
Okay, well, Jack, I know your intention is to that this is a positive film, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But when, as a mom of a 14-year-old with autism, and I hear you say the stats on autism and employment and the problem, how can I be hopeful?
Well, I think the reason to be hopeful is that there are things happening right now. I did this film to spotlight one of them, but there's a lot of other things going on right now because people are finally starting to kind of talk about it, I think. You hear great stories about car washes where a father has employed his son and others, to work at a car wash. You hear about a jewelry factory, where they're putting jewelry together. Higher functioning people, like at the Non-Pareil Institute, that are interested in coding and video games and things like that, they're becoming coders and programmers. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a grassroots effort on all sorts of levels of the spectrum to create these options out there. And I think employers at traditional workplaces are starting to think about it too. Microsoft, SAP, you hear a lot of different initiatives where they're kind of scratching the surface about how can we use the abilities of this workforce and not push them aside and use them to their maximum potential.
Jack, what prompted you to make this film? I mean, you have a history in a great background in television production. What made you veer towards autism? Do you have it in your own family? What's the story behind that?
I do. I don't have kids myself, but my sister has an adult son that's on the autism spectrum. When he was 16, they came to Denver and on a trip to visit. He had been homeschooled by my sister ever since he was a little kid. She had all the answers basically, to get him to where he needed to be by the time he was 18. She spoke to me during that trip and said she really didn't have any answers at that point. After that, like, okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm. We call it falling off the cliff, Jack.
Absolutely.
That's what us autism parents call it, falling off the cliff. So
and knowing my sister and the everything she had done to that point, I was kind of taken aback that she didn't really have any options, or that there weren't any options there at the time, and how much she was struggling with that. So I didn't have any intention of making a film at the time, but I did go on the internet kind of after that trip. I looked for myself to see, was there things out there, being done? And what was kind of shocking at that point, I found virtually nothing. And not just in the United States, but I mean, I was looking all over the world at different things, and there just wasn't a whole lot of people, there weren't a whole lot of people talking about it. And I thought, well, it might be a good idea to, I know there's a lot of sad, negative stories about that issue. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's something where if you could spotlight something positive, this might inspire others to, think about this issue and maybe do some things. And, that was the initial intent, and that's kind of what led me to this particular story, and that's how it got started.
So a personal connection, which tends to be the case always in people that are drawn to this, to doing work in the autism field. And as you started doing research in 2012 on this, you found information about the Non-Pareil Institute, I want to get more into detail about what their work is with you when we come back. So we'll be back more with Jack Creamer, who is the force behind the film Programming Hope, about the issues of employment and individuals with autism, so important to families today. So stay with us. We'll be back with more. Hello, fellow activists. In our last segment, we talked about step number 2, educate yourself. Step number 3 is get support. Now, any journey can feel overwhelming if you feel like you're walking it alone. Well, you're far from alone, because with 1 in 50 kids diagnosed with autism today, there are a lot of us out there. Of course, there's always the issue of financial support. Now, there's a handful of organizations out there that offer financial support to families in need. ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, is one of them. Visit our website at www.act-today.org to find out more about our grant process. I want to talk about a different kind of support today, emotional support. Now, you can get that from other travelers on this path. Some of the best advice I've ever received is from the moms of other kids with autism who went to school with Wyatt or were involved with programs with him. Then there are the pioneers. These are the families that have gone through this years ago, and there was very little information out there. All of these people seem to have the desire to pay it forward. Now, one of them, Lisa Ackerman, who is one of my mentors, started an organization called TACA, Talk About Curing Autism. She actually took the concept of mentors and support groups and made it available to everybody. You can go to their website, talkaboutcuringautism.org, to find out more. During the first and most difficult year after Wyatt's diagnosis, I wrote an email to close family and friends, letting them know what was going on and the challenges our family was facing, and why we dropped out of sight. I was amazed at the outpouring of love and affection and all the help I received from that email. First, you have to be vulnerable. You can't be afraid to ask. Try this out. Could you cook me a meal? Are you going to the market? Can you pick me up a few things? Could your kids play with my kid and make them feel included? Or can you come over and clean my house? Well, maybe not that last one, except with your best friend. And maybe the best support of all is having someone that listens, and that doesn't cost a dime. So until next time, surround yourself with the loving kindness of others and keep the faith. And we are back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. As you can see, I'm flying solo today without my buddy Shannon Penrod. And we are continuing our conversation with Jack Creamer. Jack is the maker of the documentary film Programming Hope. He is also the uncle of his nephew has autism, which sort of inspired him to make this film. Welcome back, Jack.
Thanks.
Okay. You started doing research for the film in 2012?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And you came across this Nonpareil Institute. Can you tell us about what they're doing at Nonpareil and why it's so special?
Well, as I said in the last segment, I didn't really find a whole lot of positive stories, and I was posting on forums and message boards and things like that. And a person that I interviewed actually kind of led me to them. And what they do, according to the website that I found, was they train and employ adults that are on the spectrum to develop and design video games and apps. Mm-hmm. So they come up with the ideas, they code them, they do everything, the art, the 3D modeling, the whole bit. So I saw that and I was like, wow, that sounds really cool, and that sounds like something a mainstream audience would be interested in. I mean, everybody has an iPhone, an iPad, everybody's familiar with an app and a game. So I decided I'd call them and find out what exactly they were doing, and it was actually more impressive than even what the website, once I went down there. It's the creation of a man named Dan Selleck, who's a software developer. It comes from a background in technology. He's also a former professional race car driver, which is interesting. He has a son that's on the spectrum, and he decided that he was going to take it upon himself to come up with a solution for him, and maybe that solution would help other people as well. So he created the Nonpareil Institute. So by the time he did that in his kitchen, he had a handful of students, and they started in the kitchen.
Necessity is the mother of invention, correct?
Absolutely,
Jack?
absolutely. So there was no, he didn't do this with a bunch of funding from any sort of big corporations or grants or anything. He just did this, in his kitchen with a few computers and use what he knew as a father and as a software developer to kind of see if this would work. It was kind of a test. And one student became 8 students, 8 students became 30, 30 became 50. By the time I showed up, when I went down there and started shooting, they had around 45 to 50 crew members. And I call them crew members because they start out sort of as a student, but this is not a school. They'll tell you it's not a school. There's no grades or anything like that. It's a training program. And so they start training them to learn how to develop additional levels to games that a lot of these guys already play at home, which is very, very fascinating. I mean, you should see the look on these guys' faces when they say, okay, you love playing this game? Well, we're going to train you to develop a new level for that game. It's very exciting. And so a lot of these guys get really into that aspect of it. Once they do that, the next step is they usually become part-time employees, and then they train other new crew members that come into the program. As they work their way up, the eventual goal and the eventual path that they hope for all of them is that they become full-time employees. Now, that doesn't mean they're all employed full-time yet, but that's the goal they're pushing for. But they do have full-time employees that are on staff that have started from the bottom and have worked their way up to the top. And those guys are doing high-level coding and actually have apps in the App Store and the Google Play stores that you can buy today. So
it's fantastic, so encouraging. And maybe we could use your connections with Dan Selleck to get him on the show sometime in the future.
Absolutely,
okay,
yeah.
Great.
He might be interested.
Sounds like a fascinating man. I just love these stories of parents that take it into their own hands. And he sounds a lot like the Danish entrepreneur. Are you familiar with Torkild Sene?
Yes, I am.
Yes, and Special Eastern, who's out of Denmark, who has done a very similar thing. Now, I want to hear about some of the people featured in the film that you zeroed in on. Can you tell us about a few of them?
One of them, his name is Aaron. He his app is actually, developed in the film and then actually gets, released as we shot the film. He was a recent high school graduate who basically didn't have any programming experience whatsoever. He'll tell you, the only real computer knowledge he had was opening up a Word document or, typing an email. He wasn't a programmer by any stretch of, the imagination. He had no idea what he wanted to do in his life, and he would basically, kind of just play games. And he thought maybe he could work at a GameStop, and that might be something that would fit his skill set. He ended up learning multiple languages, coding languages, developed his own game from his own idea, got it into the App Store, and you can play that game at Chili's restaurants on a table kiosk. You can download it on multiple platforms. And here was somebody that if you asked him before he entered the program, he probably would never dream he could have done anything like that, because of the challenges he did have. And he felt comfortable, at Nonpareil, because that's kind of the model that they're working with, is a comfortable environment where, everyone's treated as equals. You're not trying to fit them into a situation or a workplace that doesn't, fit their needs, and it lets them thrive. So that's kind of what Dan has tried to implement down there, and it seems very, very effective for the group.
That's a remarkable story. I think so many times we underestimate our young adults on the spectrum and all individuals on the autism spectrum, and this just shows you how they can really, you can raise the bar and they can rise to it. Dan, the film premiered in Dallas in 2015. Tell us about the response that you got from it, and you've also been showing it around the country since November.
Yeah, the response has been great, and my goal is to get it, in as many theaters and as many eyeballs in front of it as possible, because I think it's an important film. Sometimes people think if you don't have a connection with autism that maybe, oh, well, that's not for me, or, that they wouldn't be interested in it. It was really designed to be a mainstream film so that maybe a neurotypical audience would kind of, maybe understand what it means to be an adult on the spectrum a little bit better. And we've had great response from parents, from people on the spectrum, from neurotypical groups, all of them, because the film is uplifting. It can be funny at times, it can be touching and emotional at times, but there's a little something for everybody, and the response has been great. And theaters, independent theaters that we're showing it at on a Wednesday night normally get maybe 10, 15 people, in the theater to watch a film, like an independent film. And we'll come in there and we'll get, 100 plus in there on a Wednesday night, all across the country. And the results have been, predictable everywhere we go. Everybody, knows this is an issue if you're affected by it, and they want to come out and see something that's positive and is trying to make a difference.
Tell us how can people get in touch with you, Jack, if they're interested in this, perhaps an independent theater owner. How can they connect with you to find out how they can get their hands on this film?
The best way right now is to go to our website, programminghope.com. You can email us. All of our links and connections are on there. We also have a list of all the cities that it's going to be showing at here in the next month or two. And I can give you a list of that as well. Or go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com, and then / Programming Hope, capital P and capital H on the Hope. And most of our most up-to-date information is on Facebook. But we're going to be in Indianapolis next week, Boston the week after,
Okay,
Minneapolis.
the dates, do you have the dates in front of you? You're going to be in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Okay, can you let us know what those dates are specifically?
Indianapolis on March the 23rd. Boston on March the 30th. Minneapolis on April 6th. Washington, D.C. on April 13th.
Okay.
Chicago on April 20th. And then Houston on April 26th. Dallas on May the 4th. And then we'll be in Los Angeles on May the 9th.
Okay. Now, if parents or any of the public, anybody wants to come and watch these screenings, what's the best way for them to get the information about the theaters where they can find you?
Either on that webpage or on Facebook. We have all the ticket links, and you can purchase them in advance, and it's all right there.
Okay. I want to ask you about so many of our kids do have a technological bent. If, as a parent, you have a child that's not necessarily technologically oriented, does that mean that there's less of a chance for employment? Is this something to be concerned about?
Well, like I was saying before, I think Non-Pareil and Programming Hope is a great profile of one solution. I think it's inspirational because I think if you saw the film and you see what they're doing, you can translate kind of the basic model into a bunch of solutions. For example, Non-Pareil has a new campus in Houston that they've just opened up. One of the students or the crew members down there loves to design high-end cakes, just like you'd see on the Food Network or something like. They're amazing. And, that has nothing to do with coding or anything like that. But, the talk was, at Non-Pareil, well, maybe we need to get some sort of culinary kind of path or something like that. So whether Non-Pareil does that or maybe a baking, company does that, I think there's all sorts of options. There's a Food for Good Thought in Columbus, Ohio, invited us to show the film. What they have is a gluten-free bakery that employs adults on the spectrum. And, they come up with recipes, they bake, all sorts of, great cookies and cakes and things like that. So I think there's, with creative thinking, I think there's so many things that can be done, and I think it really is just taking a positive look at it and looking at the challenges and balancing all that. And I think, the sky's the limit.
I love that way of thinking, and you're saying this is simply a model of one way of what Nonpareil does, but it can apply to so many different things. Maybe your child has an interest in animals. Maybe your child has, as you say, an interest in cooking. My child loves art. But there are all kinds of ways that we can translate these talents into a broader purpose and hopefully employment for our kids. Before I let you go, what would be a message you would say to our viewers today who are predominantly parents and family members of individuals on the autism spectrum? The film is called Programming Hope. What words of hope, Jack, would you give to our viewers today?
I would just say that the hope is the biggest word, and that is that, you should always expect the most out of your children and don't accept anything less, because, with some creative, positive thinking, like I said, the sky's the limit. It may not be in a traditional workplace. It may be something, it may not be college. It may, you just don't know. And I think each individual has their own separate challenges and their own abilities, separate abilities that can really help them excel. And I think when you look at that and you accept the fact that maybe this won't be a traditional path, but there are things out there that can really, really give them that independence or that career, and people are out there working on it right now. I mean, this is the beginning of it. This is the ground floor. 15 years from now, this may be completely different, and we'll look back on this as the Stone Age when it came to employing adults on the spectrum. But I think there's hope out there, and I think parents with younger kids, should feel good about that.
Well, thank you for offering us hope. Jack Creamer, producer of the documentary film Programming Hope, and thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and the best of luck to you with this film.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so we will be back with more of Let's Talk Autism with Nancy without Shannon in just a moment.
Our twins, Justin and Jessica, were premature babies, so we always were very conscientious of their development. But I think it was probably 15 months, Justin started getting really obsessive compulsive with opening and closing doors. And Justin started tantruming a lot too. These would be major tantrums that were just completely debilitating to the family.
Having to take them out of the house, put them in the car, drive around, just to calm them down.
Yeah, I remember a breaking point and just thinking, you know what, we got to do something. This is not right. Once we were on the track to getting a diagnosis for autism, we started sharing that with our close friends and family. It just so happens that somebody from our older daughter's private school called us out of the blue. She introduced herself and she says, I know that recovery is possible. Those words so early in our journey were a guiding force for us. As we got more educated in knowing what is effective therapies for kids with autism, we realized quality ABA is vital to that progress. That's where we decided that CARD was the right provider for us and for our son. Justin responded very well to therapy. The behaviors were tracked, and we saw that what was being instituted was working.
Justin, what are you doing?
I'm coloring.
You are coloring. Good for you.
There was real progress, and it was progress that was tangible.
I just remember when he made a sentence, he said a sentence. We were just happy about it, going, no way, I can't believe you just did that.
What's the date? The 18th. 18th.
18th of what month?
December.
Oh, what year is it?
2007.
Oh, okay. So how old are you today then?
5.
The therapies that CARD did for Justin didn't just impact his daily living skills, but it was a positive impact on our entire family.
I'm Justin. I am in 4th grade. I like playing video games sometimes. My dream to build a teleporter machine. It's like sometimes it's like we're on an airplane and it's like really long. You guys just say, oh, hurry up with that teleporter machine. We're waiting on you. And I just started Friday Night Lights. This is our 3rd game of the season, and it's pretty fun. You have to be fast.
We attribute so much of Justin's recovery to CARD. Their goal was the same as our goal. We wanted Justin recovered. June 12, 2008 is a day that I celebrate every year because that is the day that Justin was deemed recovered from autism. And Dr. Doreen Grandpichet met with us, looked at him and just said, he's brilliant. You need to keep his mind stimulated because he's very smart and he has no residual traits of autism.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And I have a surprise for you guys. I was feeling very lonely here in the studio. And I said to Kelby, you know, I really want to get my buddy on the phone here. I know our viewers miss her. And even though we don't have her on Skype, I didn't do that to her because she's probably in her pajamas. And I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy. But I do have Shannon with me on my cell phone. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for doing the show today. You did such a good job, man. You make me look bad, but hey, it was so wonderful to watch. Fascinating.
Well, you see, Kelby's got a beautiful picture of you up, although your hair's longer now. You know, we have to update that open because, you know, you haven't had that dark hair in how long now?
Like 7 years. No, I'm
7?
kidding.
Okay.
It's been several years. I know. I know, it's been a really long time. And I don't weigh what I weighed there either. but we won't talk about that.
We won't talk about that. So, okay, I just want to, because I've missed you today, I kind of want to get your take on, first of all, let's talk about the In the News stories. That Donald Trump story about, you know, appointing Michael Savage, which is, of course, rumor, hearsay, based on the fact that he was on Michael Savage's show on October 6th, and he did say, Michael Savage said to him, when you become president, I want you to consider appointing me head of the NIH because I want America to have real science and real medicine again. And then, first of all, what do you think? What do you think of Michael Savage, Shannon?
You know, I think that Michael Savage is that low form of pond scum that says incendiary things so that he can get ratings for his show. And given the opportunity to back down on what he said about autism, he didn't take the gentleman's path and say, look, I said this for ratings. And I might have overstated my position. In fact, as you said, he chose to double down.
Yeah, he dug a deeper hole, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, here's my issue as a former teacher. When you allow people in the world to say things like that, and you don't stop them and say, I need to stop you right there, but that isn't the truth, and you don't know what you're talking about, it becomes pervasive. And we've seen in Donald Trump's campaign that he likes to say whatever is on his mind. And I know that, you know, sometimes that's just a really gratifying thing, but we're starting to see how that pays off. That if you say, if somebody throws a tomato, you know, why don't you just smack the you-know-what out of them, that people are going to do that. And for Donald Trump, this is not the only issue that he has had somebody say something that is just so clearly inappropriate, and that he lets go and continues to have relationships with people. It's a little frightening to me.
I share your concern, and I would like to say to Mr. Trump, and I know he's probably not listening to our show, but I'd love for him to get a bigger vocabulary, Shannon. If I hear him say one more time, it's great, it's terrific, and if I hear him say one more time, it's terrible, or it's disgusting, I'd really like for him to get a better command of the English language if he thinks he's going to vie for a position as our commander-in-chief. But if he could even consider appointing Michael Savage to the head of the NIH, I think we are in real trouble. Then I think we're on the same page on that one. What do you think about the story of the prodigies being the key to autism breakthrough?
I think it's a really interesting thing, and I just hope that people, we've talked about this before, that it's so interesting, people's perceptions of autism, that they either think Rain Man, or a lot of times they'll think, oh, your child must be a genius at something, and when you tell them that your child has autism, they ask what's their special talent, like, they're one of the Marvel superheroes. So I think the study is really interesting, and I hope it garners really great things for our kids. I just hope that the mainstream public doesn't further assume that this is all of our children, that they're all geniuses, they're all prodigies.
Yeah.
And I especially wanted to give a great shout out to Adele. What a wonderful, wonderful thing that she did for that young woman. And these are the kinds of role models that I want to see more of. We've seen Katy Perry do wonderful things in concert.
Right.
And
Adam
what a lovely
Levine.
thing.
Adam Levine, who got down on the floor with the young boy with Down syndrome. We love Adam. He's a big supporter of Act Today.
And this is how we teach inclusion. This is how we go about this. Not by calling people names and saying this doesn't exist. That's not helpful. Can you hear my dog barking like a crazy loon? But
yeah,
I so
Shannon has a special needs dog. Everybody should know. And
she's on a gluten-free diet.
She is on the gluten-free diet? Okay. I've never seen the dog because the dog is not allowed to interact with other humans besides family members, which is not surprising to me that you would keep that dog, Shannon.
Of course. Well,
you would
she's
be the
a wonderful dog, and she has a great allegiance to our son, and I know nothing would ever happen to him with her around. But whoever had her before mistreated her so badly and clearly had blonde hair. So she's had a great deal of behavioral
No wonder
therapy.
you keep me apart from her.
I do. And she's had a lot of ABA, as strange as that may seem to people. We took her to animal behaviorist. So she's better now, but for animals, it's really hard to erase that memory. Temple Grandin actually talks about that in her books, that if a horse has been beaten by somebody who wears a hat, then a horse will react to everyone who has a hat.
I can. Well, they're very intuitive creatures. As you know, I've owned horses, and ours are donated now to Special Spirits, but they definitely have that intuition about who's on their back. I loved having Jack Creamer today, and Kelpie's telling me I only have a minute. These 2 hours went by really fast, and I had to get you on the phone, though, because I didn't have another guest, and I just miss you.
I missed you, too.
But,
thank you for doing it, though. You were lovely.
Well, thank you. But I love Jack Creamer, and I want to talk more about that. He gave me hope because, sometimes I feel, because my kid's not a techie like Jem is, your son. I mean, I'm always like, well, Shannon's got it made. Jem can be a coder. What am I going to do with Wyatt, who, an artist? I mean, gee, there's so much room for another fine artist in the world today.
But I loved what he said about the designing cakes. There's room for everyone.
And Wyatt loves to cook. And I just think he gave so much hope to all parents out there.
Absolutely. I think the name of the movie is aptly named.
Programming Hope. Yep. Programming Hope.
And since he's coming to Los Angeles, I said we need to go to see it.
Let's do that. Let's do that. All right.
May 7th.
Kelby's telling me I've got 15 seconds here, but are you
Well,
feeling better? And are you going to get some rest today?
Oh, yes, I'm laying down even as we speak.
Okay, well, I'm demanding that you go back to sleep. I'm sorry I disturbed you and got you here, but I think your regular viewers wanted to see you today and know you're okay. And you may be back tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, we have an interview tomorrow with Jennifer Jones from Autism Speaks.
Okay, great. Oh yeah, she's wonderful. We're featuring her in an upcoming Autism Family Portraits as well. She's such an inspiration.
Yes, she is.
She's a single mom of 2 boys, one who has been severely affected, and she's just such a force in the community. And you've got her tomorrow talking about the upcoming Autism Speaks walk, right?
Yes, which is a great, great event.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let you say your normal sign off, which is goodbye and
give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye
and
for now.
I'm going to say goodbye and give yourselves a hug from me. And Shannon, go back to bed.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, honey. Well, thank you for joining me today.